Hi folks, I'm Kerry Farr. Welcome to In Your Corner. You know, in 2001, I lost my first wife, Diane, to breast cancer. You know, she was sick for 4 years, and during the last year of her life, I was her caregiver. And it was, you know, really tough. I had to learn some things that I didn't think I could do. She had fluid outside her lungs, and I had to learn how to dress a wound and pull fluid off of her lungs so that she wouldn't suffocate. And it was really hard on me being her caregiver for the last year of her life, and obviously it was much harder on her. But I remember about 2 days before she died, I came home from the hospital. I'd been to see her, and I fell down on my knees and I began to cry. And I said, Lord, I can't take this anymore. It had been so hard caring for her for that last year of her life. And about 2 days later, she died. And I felt this incredible guilt because I didn't have the strength to carry on, and I'd given up on her just before she passed away. And friend, today I know that many of you are going through circumstances like this in your life. You're caring for somebody, and it's become an unbelievable burden, and you don't know how you're going to go on. Well, I want to tell you, Peter Rosenberger is with us today, and he's been a caregiver for over 30 years of his life. And so Peter has a radio program here in Nashville, Tennessee, where he comforts people that are caregivers. And Peter, I want to welcome you to In Your Corner. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, what a treat. And as you're saying those things about your wife, you know, you can just see it on you. And this is what I see on my fellow caregivers and myself, the weight of it. It is not an easy thing to put yourself between a vulnerable loved one and disaster. And one of the things I'm on a mission about, Carrie, is when we do stand at a grave, and we most likely will, that we do so without clenched fist. Either resentful at the person we were taking care of, resentful at family members that didn't help out the way we thought they should, resentful at ourselves, beating up ourselves for it, or resentful at God. Recognizing that I didn't do this to my wife, you didn't do this to your wife. We're doing the best that we know to do with it. We're not walking away from it. And my passion is to reach as many fellow caregivers as I can, and I don't care if they suck at it. If they're trying, I want to help. And I'm taking 3 decades of experience and mostly failure. Everything I've learned by failing at it. But I'm taking that and offering what I can in the midst of these things, because I see, just look at that, it's been 14 years. And you can just see it on your face as you're recounting it. The weight of that thing, it is crushing to do this. And my passion is to be able to reach into that with practical, proven help, and point people to Christ as we do it.
And you know, Peter, you and your wife Gracie, who we're talking about, that you've been taking care of for these years, you've had some amazing ministries. You had Standing with Hope.
Still do.
And still do. And people probably don't know your wife's story. She's an incredible, you know, vocalist, has an incredible voice. But at 17 years of age, she was in an auto accident that took both her legs out, right?
Well, it didn't at the time. She was it was one of those Evel Knievel wrecks. A lot of people, I tell you that nowadays, and nobody knows who Evel Knievel is, but it's one of those kind of wrecks where everything was just busted up. And they tried to save her legs for a long time. And she finally gave up the right one 8 years later, and then the left one 12 years later. And that was 20 years ago. The surgery count now has, when I met her, she'd already had 20 surgeries. She'd already had the wreck when I met her. And she limped, she had some scars, and so far I knew she'd had a wreck, but I didn't really have any frame of reference. She was young and incredibly beautiful and just vivacious and just a wonderful gal. And I thought, well, I love this guy. I'm going to take care of her the rest of my life. I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
Now, she'd already had 20 surgeries when I met her. Now we're at 78 surgeries that I can count. Multiple amputations now, 60 plus doctors, 12 hospitals, 7 insurance companies, $9 million of medical bills. And it's not slowing down. We're still dealing with it. And she lives with an enormous amount of pain, and it's the daily trauma of this thing, the chronicness of it. You know, we go through these stages, Carrie, when we're praying for rescuing grace. God, get me out of this. God, get me out of this. God, get me out of this. But when it doesn't end, your prayers change. I don't know what it is for everybody else. I just know that for me, there was just kind of this light switch. You realize this isn't going to change. He's not stopping this. God, sustain me in this becomes your prayer. Because perseverance, fortitude, those kinds of things, we don't really talk about that too much in our society. We want it fixed. We want it right now. It doesn't work that way for so many families, particularly families with special needs children and so forth.
And so, Peter, through the years, as Gracie's gotten worse, you've had to do more for her.
Well, I tell folks I can bring home the bacon fried up in a pan and never let you forget I'm a man. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I do. I you know, I
At
look
least you've got a sense of humor about
you know, it helps to have a sense of humor. And Jeff Foxworthy and I did a thing a while back for AARP. I called him up and said, "You want to do this with me? As you might be a caregiver if," and played off as you might be a redneck. And he said, "Sure, write out some of the jokes." I said, "These aren't jokes. This is my life." You know, if you've got a professional carpet cleaner on retainer, you're probably a caregiver. You know, if you have to open up the door with your butt so you get the wheelchair through, you're probably a caregiver.
If you were on a first-name basis with a hospital security guard, see you tomorrow, Earl, you might be a caregiver.
If you've ever used Neosporin as a verb.
Do it.
Hold still, baby. I got to Neosporin this so we can get to church on time.
Oh my gosh. If you've ever hooked up your dog to your wife's wheelchair just to see if it would work, please tell me you have not done this one.
I might have some video.
Really?
Yeah.
I want to see it.
Yeah, you got to have a sense of humor, and I have picked up a lot of the slack. I look at guys, by the way, that in their home, and they don't do laundry, and they don't, you know, cook and do clean and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, why? You know, I was very blessed. I had a father that modeled that for me, and it was nothing for me to see Dad pick up the vacuum cleaner and or clean the kitchen, whatever. And growing up, I had 4 brothers, so we had to clean. Wednesday night was my night to clean. Well, I learned how to do that, and so it just kind of gravitated into this thing. So yeah, I have to do a lot of tasks. I have to do a lot of different things, and that's part of being a caregiver. But the hard part about being a caregiver is not dealing with the laundry. It's not dealing with even medical insurance. Once you learn it, you got it. It's what you talked about at the beginning, the guilt that eats you up. See, caregivers suffer from 3 things: fear, obligation, and guilt. I call it the fog. And we go around in a fog with it. And just like if you're driving in a fog, you can run right off the road and get yourself into a world of hurt. And we're operating this fear, obligation, and guilt. And here's how you know if you do it. If you have a particular obligation, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. That's obligation. And I say to myself, I say to every caregiver I know, let's replace that obligation with stewardship. Yeah, it's an old-fashioned word, but stewardship is a really good word. I don't own this. I didn't do this to Gracie. I can't fix it. You couldn't fix your thing with your wife. You didn't do this. You couldn't fix it.
That was the thing, you know, we only got 20 seconds left in this segment, but that was the thing that I felt guilt about because I couldn't help her heal.
But it wasn't your job.
Yeah, you're right, brother.
That was not your job.
You know, and Pete, now that people have learned about your story, when we come back in a minute, we'll talk about how you can help them. Folks, we'll be back in just a minute with Peter Rosenberger. Stay tuned. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Hello, I'm James Payne, and God has raised up such a unique ministry called In Your Corner with Carrie Farr. There's a number on your screen and also a web address. Carrie needs your help. Would you join him in his corner and help him to take this gospel of Jesus Christ to professional athletes and people around the world? Let's all get in Carrie's corner.
Okay, friend, we're back with Peter Rosenberger. Peter, you know, before the break, we were talking about how you've been a caregiver for the last 30 years, but you've written a book, you know, to help others who are struggling with caring for a loved one. Tell us a little bit about that and how you can help them.
Well, it's called Hope for the Caregiver, and Hope for the Caregiver is not some kind of, you know, Hallmark card, hearts and rainbows and unicorns and so forth. It is the conviction that we can live a calmer, healthier, and dare I say it, even more joyful life, even while looking at grim realities. Now, this isn't theory to me. There are some people that do this for a couple of years and they go out and write about it. Their loved one passed away, and then they write a book about it. They're an expert about it. I'm still doing it 3 decades later, so I don't know what you call somebody like me. This is how I live my life. And I've learned some hard lessons through this thing, and it's not about, again, it's not about dealing with the patient. My wife's situation, not many people can tell me how to better take care of her. I've been doing it for too long. I can't tell other people how to take care of their loved ones. That's not what this is about. What I deal with is, what does it look like to help someone who's helping? How do you help the person pushing the wheelchair? How do you speak to that person in the hospital room corner? How do you speak to that person who's up in the middle of the night folding laundry or staring at the ceiling fan, and they're so weary, they're so tired, and they're so frustrated, and they're so angry, and they're at the breaking point? What does it look like to help that person? How do you minister? How do you pray for them?
Well, how do you deal with that?
Well,
personally,
I go back, what I do is I go back to understanding the 3 things that, again, that we caregivers deal with: fear, obligation, and guilt. That fear will eat you up. And I'm telling you, man, we will live in the wreckage of our future. What if all this happens? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? You know what? Scripture says all through Scripture, fear not, fear not, fear not, fear not. Why does it say that? Because God knows we're scared spitless. And so we come back to the reality of, wait a minute, we're just going to have to live for today. That's all we got.
Yeah, but you know, the Bible says fear not. But I want to tell you, when my wife was dying of cancer, I was scared to death.
Yes, you were.
How do you apply that in your life?
I faced it, and I realized that I can't control this. And God is faithful even while I'm watching this.
So
as she was wheeled into surgery,
trust.
We're not supposed to. There's no other thing to do.
Yeah.
I've tried. There ain't no other place to go. As she was wheeled into surgery to take her legs off, I'm going to have to hang on to the cross. There is no other place to go. And I tell them, you're welcome to believe in something else if you want. But what else are you going to believe in? What else are you going to do? And we realize, oh, death, where is thy victory? Grave, where is thy sting on this thing? And this is, all of a sudden those words start meaning something. The obligation, I got to do this, I got to do this. The guilt, you know, there ain't no problem so bad, Carrie, that guilt can't make it worse. And we just wrap ourselves up into emotional pretzels until we start to realize just how big that cross is. What does it really mean that Jesus stretched out his arms and gave his life for us? What does it mean that he said he is making all things new? Not all new things, making all things new. What does all this mean? How do you pray for somebody? Somebody comes up to me and says, brother, I'm going to pray for you. You look to be burdened down. What do you want me to do with that information? What are you going to pray? You going to pray your legs grow back? You going to pray she has a good night's rest? What are you going to pray? And then, what do you want me to do with that? It's like going to somebody up at the post office and you see a bunch of boxes and they're carrying a bunch of boxes, and you say, brother, you look to be burdened down. I'm going to pray for you. Well, hold the door while you do it. You know, I mean, come on. I mean, we can do better than this. We don't need to be glib as Christians. We can recognize.
So what would you suggest that somebody do instead of saying, I'm going to pray
for you? First thing
you?
You look at them and you say, I see you. Caregivers feel invisible. We lose our identity in this thing. We don't even know who we are anymore. And see, people were so busy asking you about your wife. How many people asked about you? How many people came up to you and looked you in the eye and said, Carrie, I see you. And I see the magnitude of what you're carrying, and I hurt for you. And I don't know what to say. But I'm going to stay right here with you. And I'm going to care for you to the best I can. See, I can't count the number of people who ask me about my wife, but I can count the ones that ask about me. That's what I'm looking for, is to how do you reach those caregivers? What does it look like? And they are on the cliff. They are terrified. And you have to slow walk them back, and you have to be gentle. You don't try to fix it. You don't go in there and just, I tell my Pentecostal and charismatic brothers, y'all be cool. Don't you go in there and just start yelling at them in tongues. You'll knock them right off the cliff. You gently walk them back, and you just gently help them get to a point where they can be calmer. We just take little baby steps. Progress, not perfection. We're not trying to fix their situation. We just want to help move them away from dangerous places. I want to help them physically. You love boxing. I do martial arts. I help get myself into shape physically. That helps. Fiscally, your money. I mean, you know, in the South, by the way, for example, we know what to do with the short-term problem. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there's macaroni and cheese. We got that. But what do you do with it? This thing goes on and on. You can only take so many meals to somebody, for somebody's got to learn how to cook. You can only give a financial gift. Somebody's got to make money and manage that money. You start shepherding people on how to better create a sustainable infrastructure. What I do at Standing with Hope with our prosthetic limb outreach, we put legs on amputees in West Africa. Just got back from there. You can't just put a leg on somebody and say, have a nice life. You got to have somebody trained there to maintain that leg. It's called sustainability, and that's how we help them.
You know, Pete, we've only got a couple minutes left in this segment, but are you all alone right now taking care of Gracie? I mean, it's just you and her at home?
I have an attendant that I hire to help me when I'm not there and comes in a little bit during the week.
Well, so, you know, what would you say to that person that, you know, is all alone taking care of a loved one and they have no support, no church family, no friends? What would you say to them to comfort them today?
I'm not going to be able to comfort you today with answers to the problems, but I will say that we're going to take one step at a time. One of them is get into a church. Get into a church.
Get some type of
support.
Get
a church community, because you are isolated. As a caregiver, suffer from 3 I's. We lose our independence, we become isolated, and we lose our identity in this thing. For example, if I ask you, how are you doing? Well, we just got home from the hospital. They speak in first person plural, not first person singular. So we start carving out their own identity. You make a phone call to get someone to come in there and sit with them while you go see your own doctor. 72% of caregivers don't even see their own doctors. That's a time bomb. We're taking care of the sickest among us are being cared for people who don't even see their own doctor. And there's 65 million caregivers, and the number's going to grow. So we start taking step by step. You didn't get here overnight, you're not going to get out of it overnight. I can't tell you you're going to have 24-hour help coming in there to help, but you're going to have to start taking some baby steps today, right now. You can pick up the phone and make an appointment to see your own doctor. You can pick up the phone and find a local church. And in my book, I lay out what kind of church you want to look for. Don't go to those churches that have vending machine theology, where you just put your money in and ask God what you want, and you know, name it and claim it, and don't do that. That's not even good theology. And you go to ones that preach the gospel, preach that cross that is in your life, that transcends all this stuff.
Yeah, and as we close for this segment, you know, the thing that was a comfort to me, the one thing that was a comfort to me was that I knew my wife was a Christian and that she was truly going to go to heaven. Folks, we'll be back in just a moment with Peter Rosenberger, and we're going to ask him, you know, some other ways that you can get help or get relief in this situation that you're going through as you're the caregiver for someone you love. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Hello, friend. Jesus talked about a time of trouble that was going to come upon the earth. He called this the latter days or the end days. And many biblical prophecy scholars believe that we are in the very last days of the latter days upon earth. Recently, we sat down with prophecy Bible scholar Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, and we asked Dr. DeYoung about the end times, and we asked him what was next on God's prophetic timetable for mankind and planet Earth. And we actually recorded 4 programs with him. And my friend, if you want to know what's going on in these last of the last days, I would encourage you to get these 4 programs. You can have all 4 of these interviews for a gift of $50 to In Your Corner Ministries today. Just call the number that you see on the screen below or go to our website at inyourcorner.tv. You know, give a love gift of $50 and we will rush these programs out to you right away. And my friend, I want to thank you for helping support In Your Corner Ministries. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Folks, we're back with Peter Rosenberger. And Peter, you know, we were talking before the break about, you know, how hard it is to be a caregiver. And you're still young and healthy. I know my father was 74, 73 years of age when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so it was kind of late in life for him to be a caregiver. And so he took care of my mother as she, you know, had this dreadful disease. And as a result, it took a toll on him, and he actually died a year before her. So, you know, what do people do to gain strength? And it's tough tough on elderly people especially. Where can they go? Are there social programs? Are there places people can go to get help?
There are, and this is one of the things, that scenario you described is one I try to bang into the head of my fellow caregivers. Just because they're diagnosed with something doesn't mean that they're going to die before us. What happens is we put our life on hold, we recklessly hurl ourselves at taking care of someone else, and you know what, they may not make it, but you have to. Because if I go down, it's a 2-for-1 with my wife. And that's the reality of my life.
Yeah, because she's lost all.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to.
You're a lifeline.
And somebody says, well, I can't afford to go do this. I can't go to see my own doctor. I don't have time. I said, no problem. Tell me who's next in line to take care of them, and I'll talk to them instead. And then the point gets made, because there's not often somebody next in line. And what we've got is an aging population in our country. We're going to have 90 million baby boomers, almost 90 million baby boomers, stepping into senior status just every single day. They're just adding up. $1 trillion worth of wealth is going to be transferred in taking care of these people. Families are not prepared for this crushing blow. We've got all kinds of scenarios out there. People have not done anything to put long-term care insurance in place. They don't have any kind of life insurance, whatever. You can't just deal with a healthy diet and get a good night's rest and think you're going to be okay. It's physically, it's fiscally, it's emotionally, it's spiritually. You've got to take care of you. And taking care of you is not an easy thing to do when you look at somebody who suffers. But I love my wife better if I'm healthier. Healthy caregivers make better caregivers. I've got to be involved in church. I've got to be involved in physical activity. I've got to make sure my finances are okay. I'm not doing this because I'm selfish. I'm doing it because I'm being a steward and loving her better. But I also have to realize what is mine and what is not mine. And the way I always look at it is, I look down at my hands. If I don't see nail prints, this ain't mine to fix. I am not her savior.
Yeah.
And I can't be. I didn't do this. I didn't cause it. I can't fix it. And once I understand where the roles are, then I do the best that I can with it. And I don't have to keep my fist all clenched like this. And another thing I want to tell, one of the things I'd love to tell my fellow caregivers is, when you're dealing with somebody who is over the top in their behavior, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, or drug addiction, alcoholism, it doesn't matter. There's so many different impairments going on that get involved. They're not doing it to you. They're just doing it. You just happen to be the closest one. They're not waking up every day trying to screw up your life. They are making decisions based on their own impairments, their own dysfunctions. And it's okay for you to detach from that and realize you didn't cause this and you can't cure this. And you're a steward of it, and you do the best you can. If they get into a place where they're suicidal or things like that, you're going to have to call the authorities. You're going to have to make the hard calls. You're not responsible. It's triage. Sometimes it's emotional triage and physical triage. If they got a compound fracture and there's a bone sticking out, you're not going to sit there and try to work on the relationship. You're going to get them the medical attention they need. If the same way with some type of compound fracture of the mind, of the soul, you're going to have to get them the professional help that they need.
Well, you know, we've talked a lot, or you've talked a lot about the caregiver, but you've touched on a subject there. The person that's sick is often depressed. You know, how does a caregiver help that person that's maybe laying in bed and needs some comfort? How do they encourage them?
Well, I think you can do a lot of things with comfort. I do this with my wife, and I have to deal with that a lot. She's in a lot of pain all the time, but I cannot stop doing other things and be the center of her entire world. Sometimes I have to make what I call unilateral decisions and recognize that I've got to see the long game. Sometimes all she can see is the short game. And that's when you have a lot of people with depression and chronic pain and so forth, all they can see, it's right up in their face. They can't see it. It obfuscates everything. And so my job is to look at the long game and realize, okay, this really is an awful situation. I'm sorry, and I hurt for you. I've got to go to work.
You've got to provide.
I've got to go. I got to make sure that the kids are taken care of. I've got to make sure that the mortgage is paid. I don't have the luxury of wallowing in this. I don't, because if I do, she will be hurt. Healthy caregivers make better caregivers.
You know, a number of years ago, I interviewed a former NFL football player that had over 30 surgeries. And you know, there's a lot of pain medication. He became addicted, and I'm talking about a Christian brother that became addicted to pain medication. How do you deal with that type of situation in your wife's case?
Well, one of the things is you have a good pain doctor involved. If you have a lot of pain medication, you better make sure you have a very good pain doctor involved. The other thing is you don't get in that conversation between the doctor and the patient. when it comes to pharmaceuticals. You stay out of that conversation unless you're asked, because they can evaluate that patient based on the patient's behavior. And if you're interrupting and trying to facilitate and getting there and so forth, you're going to end up screwing up the process. And you need to just bite your tongue and learn to like the taste of blood. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. And then recognize that they have their own experience to experience as well. And my wife, if that pain medication is making her behavior erratic, I don't need to cover that up. I need to let the doctor see that so that he will adjust the medication. But it better be a pain specialist. It better not be some kind of, fly-by-night doctor doing this kind of stuff. You better have somebody who really knows their business.
Yeah. And Peter, we've just got a short period of time left in the show. What, or where, I guess I should ask you, would you offer some people advice on how to go get help outside of the home?
3 things. One of them is you start with your pastor. I mean, your pastor is going to be tied in with some things. I also recommend caregivers get counseling at least once a week. I mean, really, please see a trained professional, whether it's social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, just to have somebody put all the pieces out on the table and go through them with you that's trained professional. Pastors are not geared for the long-term counseling. They're short-term counseling. So go to that. Support groups. Support groups are wonderful for these sort of things. Every disease has one out there. And then I guess for a 4th thing, see your own doctor and ask for resources out there. I do a lot of stuff with different organizations, AARP and so forth. They have all kinds of stuff on their website. There's so many places out there you can go within your city and so forth that'll have respite care, adult daycare, lots of things. But unless you sit down with somebody like a social worker or licensed mental health counselor who knows of those things, you're not going to know. Make the phone call. Sometimes that phone feels like it's 100 pounds. Pick it up, make the phone call, and ask for some help.
Pete, we're out of time, but in the couple of seconds left, tell us how people can get in contact with you.
Standingwithhope.com.
Standingwithhope.com.
Standingwithhope.com is the easiest way, and you'll find all these things and more out there. And listen to the show.
Folks, thank you so much for tuning in today. I don't know if you've ever heard Dave Ramsey, but he's the go-to guy when it comes to debt. I really believe that Peter is the go-to guy when it comes to support, for caregivers. Pete, thanks again so much for joining us on In Your Corner today.
Absolutely.